I'm your host, Michael Messerly, and this is Scary, but True. Not my mother. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night. Like if you get stuck outside, you will die kind of cold. That, plus the snowfall, makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers, so me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go, "Oh shit," and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, "Meows and Boo, anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yep, just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs, and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle. "Yep, just give me a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong. Like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't put my finger on. Weirded out, I reply back, "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now, as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to the garage is, and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black. Pitch black. All of the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling, "Mom? Where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs, grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says. "My mom's not home," I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her." I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home, we need to leave now." I took a few steps toward the back door that opens up to the yard, and I see my dog shaking on the couch and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them. I just knew that if we left, something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone. Something is really off. I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Meows and Boo? What's going on?" She answers, "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up, you weren't there," I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar. I wasn't feeling very well. Are you okay?" "What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story, and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home, but before she did, you could hear something upstairs. Not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air. Like a black hole was slowly moving up from one room to the next. And the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home, you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us, but this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I've moved away to Arizona, but whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton, he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. I came across an incredibly creepy family a while back. In around 2018 or 19, I, 25F at the time, was 18 or 19, and living in Nebraska, where I grew up. I lived in the largest city in Nebraska, but it was essentially surrounded by corn and wheat fields. The city was expanding, so rich folks started building huge houses with giant properties on the edge of town as things proceeded to grow. All of that being said, I had a good friend whose parents' houses was one of those big ones right on the blurring line between the fields and the city. My friends and I were constantly hanging out at his place because it was fun. They had tons of property to ride 4x4s on, a hot tub, a huge living room for us to watch sports and have reality TV binge sessions, etc. Plus, his parents were super cool and we could drink out there as long as we stayed at the house. It was tons of fun, even though I was/am quite scared of the dark, so I would just not go outside after a certain time because there was little lighting and the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. I always felt a weird energy driving to and from his place if it was late at night, but never had anything happen until one night. The drive out there was a long, winding two-way road that had thick trees on both sides, and you passed one of the city's largest cemeteries on the way. Barely any lighting, of course, beside the street lamps every once in a while, and very little traffic. It's all inherently a bit creepy, and I'll admit to having sped through this section of road many times to get through it as quickly as possible. This specific night was perfect spring weather, so I was driving with my windows down, listening to music, and it was around 10 p.m. I was coming around one of the curves in the road when I had to essentially slam on my brakes. Right in front of me in the middle of the road, maybe 50 yards away, was what looked like a family. Again, picture a completely pitch black road with thick forest on both sides and only my headlights to show what's in front of me. This was a family of 3 or 4. A tall, slim woman, an average height and weight man, a child, short hair but couldn't tell the gender based off the clothes, and couldn't see their face, maybe around 8 years old, and the mother was pushing a fucking stroller. Their clothes looked normal, not tattered, but not nice. They were also not carrying any light source, meaning before I arrived behind them in my car, they had been walking in a pitch black. They were all facing away from me, completely silent in the middle of the street, the same direction I was heading. I had turned my music down to hear if they were speaking, had music playing, etc. They didn't. The hairs on my arms immediately stood up. I came to a stop in the road behind them, obviously, and just sat there for a moment to let them move. They seemed to be completely unaffected by me and didn't even turn their heads slightly, nor did they attempt to move out of my way. I literally thought I was going insane, or that I was dreaming. It was so surreal. Before I really had time to fully process and register what I was seeing and how truly strange it was, they all, at the same time, stopped walking and very slowly turned to face my car. This scared the absolute shit out of me. I honestly didn't give myself enough time to look at their faces as they turned. I immediately threw my car in reverse and sent it backwards for probably a full 20 seconds before flipping a U-turn, nearly running myself off the road and booking it the other direction. The only thing I remember noticing is that the stroller looked to be completely empty. This was the part that sticks in my mind the most. I never felt terror like that in my life. I checked my rearview mirror probably 1,000 times before getting to a main road and never saw a glimpse of them. In fact, I never saw a glimpse of them ever again. I tried asking my friend and his family about it, only to essentially feel like I was insane because of the way they looked at me. Every time I tell this story, I get one of 3 reactions. They immediately think I'm fucking cuckoo, think I'm lying, or have had something sort of similar happen to them. I don't really care if no one believes me, honestly. It was and still is the creepiest thing to have ever happened to me, and I think about it all the time. It was either some weird-ass family trying to scare the shit out of someone, a distraction for an attempted robbery, assault, etc., or it was something more sinister. I'm going to tell myself for probably the rest of my life that it was the first option. Help me, I'm lost. I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house. I'm probably 10 to 11 at this time. One night, I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around the corner and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So I made the trip and finished my business. I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Click, click, click. Finally, it shut completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. The white shape then began whispering in a quiet man's voice, "Help me, please. Help me. I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't. Instead, I barely said, "No," before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms, pulls me into my room, and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open and slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaked me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it and it will come back. Our final story is called "A Lady Has Been Following Me Since I Was a Child." When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I lived in a small 2-story house at Rural County Road with my mother. My stepdad was out of state working. He traveled a lot. One of my mother's and I favorite activities was movie night. We would go all out, snack trays, drinks, candy, the works. We would sit for hours at night, vegging out and watching movies. We were both camped out on the floor watching It by Stephen King. She had paused the movie and was planning on making a run to the fridge. Before she could stand up, we heard a crashing sound come from the stairs. At the top of the stairs, my mom had a desk where she left her sewing machine, a large tackle box that she used to keep her sewing needles, thread, etc., and a large box of pictures that she always planned on hanging up but never did. We both turned our attention into the next room to see her sewing machine laying on the floor at the bottom of the steps. It had fallen with such force that it had broken to several pieces. As we stood looking, her tackle box came flying down the stairs. This thing came down the stairs with a force strong enough to avoid touching 3/4 of the steps on its way down before smashing open on the final 2 steps. Out of curiosity more than fear, I started to approach the staircase. Just as I started walking, the box of pictures my mom had sitting on the desk came flying down the stairs with the same force as the previous 2 objects. Glass shattered and frames broke as the box tumbled down the last 2 or 3 steps. My mother at this point must have grabbed the bat she kept behind the front door because when she grabbed me from behind, she was holding it in her hand. She pulled me back and told me to stay put as she walked over to the stairs. Banging the bat against the banister, she yells, "The police are on their way. Whoever you are, get the fuck out of my house." Silence. She hits the bat against the banister again. "I don't know how you got in here, but I want you to get the fuck out of my house while you still have the chance." Silence. She then hands me the cordless phone and tells me if something goes wrong, she wants me to run outside and call 911. I agreed. She makes it known that she's coming up and has a weapon. About a minute after watching her ascend the stairs, I hear a blood-curdling scream come from my mother. Immediately, my 10-year-old self turned tail, ran outside, and dialed 911. I informed the operator what had happened, and she for some reason insisted that my scrawny 10-year-old self go back inside and see if I can check on my mother. Because after all, if there was an intruder out to harm us, sending me back inside was brilliant. Before I could start making my way back inside, my mother walked out the front door, approached me, took the phone, and informed the operator that everything was fine. She had went upstairs to investigate and got startled. An officer was still sent out and performed a walkthrough of the house, just to make sure no one was present. There was no one there. A few years later, my mom decided to elaborate upon her being quote-unquote startled that night. She said as she came to the top of the stairs, she thought she saw a woman standing at the end of the hallway. She was embarrassed to admit this at the time to the officer or to me. She wanted to keep her tough mother persona, or maybe she just didn't want to scare me any more than I already was. That was the first mention or appearance of a woman. Several months later, I had a friend over to stay the night. We turned in for the night, having outlasted my mom herself already being in bed. I slept in my bed and he slept in a sleeping bag on the floor next to the bed. I'm not sure how long we were asleep, if it was even long at all. I was awoken by the sound of somebody slowly coming up the stairs. The sound of dry feet scratching against our wooden steps. Even today, the thought of that sound gives me chills. At first, I just laid there listening as they came up the steps and started their slow, dry scratching way down the hall. Whoever they were didn't stop to turn on the light as they reached the top, just kept walking in the dark. I could hear the sound of things being moved and rattled. I remember this sense of uncontrollable dread just sweep over me. And being a child at the time, I did the only thing I could think of. I mustered up a soft, low cry for my mom, probably hoping for an answer, but got nothing. The steps stopped. Midway down the hallway toward my room, it was silent again. Then, almost as quickly as they stopped, they started up again. This time, they were right outside my wide open door. Another childish whimper for my mom received a response, but the woman's voice I heard respond was not my mother. I threw myself off the bed in an absolute panic, landing on top of my friend saying, "Shh, shh, there's someone in my room." We both laid there in silence, scared out of our mind. Silence. The footsteps began again inside of my room. We both shot up, hitting the light next to my bed. Nothing. The room was empty. We both ran downstairs and woke up my mother asking if she was just upstairs in my room, even though deep down I already knew the answer. There was some woman, other than my mother, inside our house, inside of my room, who tried talking to me. Skipping ahead a few years, nothing involving a woman has happened again. I think I had kind of forgotten about it at this point. We were living in a new state and a new town. I was having a sort of sleepover with a group of friends. One of my friend's mothers worked the night shift, so on some weekends he would invite us all over to crash and play video games without his mom knowing. We were all gathered in the living room taking turns on Virtual Fighter and, as boys would typically do, began fighting and roughhousing with each other over who would get the next turn. My friend's little brother came into the room, about a year younger than us, and thought it would be fun to jump in and roughhouse with us. He jumped onto my back, and by reflex I tried to spin around and ended up landing my elbow into the side of his head, busting his lip wide open. Obviously by accident, so there were no tempers or anything. His little brother ran off crying and locked himself in his room. Everyone laughing and trying to guilt trip me. We just kept on going with our night, eventually falling asleep. Being one of the last to wake up in the morning, everyone else was back playing Virtual Fighter. I sat up and called next turn. As I did, everyone stopped and looked at me oddly. They started explaining that some older lady with dark brown hair had showed up, knocked on the door, and was asking for me, where I was, then proceeded to say, "I'm sorry for what happened to your brother. Cody didn't mean to hurt him." They said she then just turned and walked off. 2 out of the 5 people there were my close friends, and they know who my mother was. They had met her on several occasions. They all claimed to have never seen her before. They had no idea who she was. I kept asking, "Are you guys sure it wasn't so-and-so?" And nope. This lady was a complete stranger. About a year later, I was spending some time with my girlfriend. We were at our normal hangout right down the road from her house. We were talking about random stuff when out of nowhere, she said, "Hey, I met your grandma, or maybe it was your aunt." "What do you mean?" I asked. "My grandma passed away before I was born and my mom doesn't have any siblings." She went on to tell me that a couple days ago a lady showed up at her door, saying she was looking for me. She said she asked, "Where's Cody?" And before she could finish answering, saying maybe I was at some other friend's house, the lady turned and walked away, didn't introduce herself, just asked for me and then walked off. Again, as the previous time, this woman has showed up. My girlfriend had met my mother and was 110% sure it was not her. All she knew was that she was an older lady with dark brown hair. That's twice an older woman with dark brown hair has almost mysteriously appeared looking for me, only to just walk off and disappear just as strangely. Nobody saw her physically appear, just simply turn and walk off. No vehicle, just walk off. Now, this instance is up for interpretation, but in my opinion, fits the bill of being followed by someone or something. One night, my friend Robert and I were walking over to another friend's house just to see if he wanted to hang out. We lived on the same road, just opposite ends. Our end being the more populated, his being the more secluded. I walked along the shoulder as Robert walked semi in the middle of the left lane. To our left, about 15 to 20 feet, was the tree line. As we were walking, Robert suddenly stopped and stared. Fixated at the tree line, he asked, "Did you see that?" He said apparently he had thought he saw a shadowy outline of a person following us just past the tree line. Actually looking, we saw nothing. Darkness and trees. On the walk back, this time with a note of panic and fear in his voice, claimed he saw it again, a shadowy outline of a person just following us past the tree line. Now, just one instance of this wouldn't be so bad. You could chalk it up to imagination. However, this proceeded to happen on several occasions, but only to him, and only when he was around me. Always the same thing. He claimed to see a shadowy outline of a person following us just out of his vision. It actually got to the point it unnerved him so much, he would no longer hang out around me for about 6 months. Maybe something was following us, following me. Maybe he could see it, I don't know. This is one of the events that's basically left open for interpretation. Forward another few months, I had just got home from a late screening of The Messengers. I think that's the name. I had both of my windows open and was hanging a poster on my wall when from outside in the pitch black, I heard a female's voice call my name. It wasn't just a quick blurt that could be passed off as imagination. It was kind of drawn out a bit. It trailed. I peered out thinking my girlfriend had snuck over for a visit. I saw nothing. I went back to what I was doing, and again, this time, it sounded like whoever it was practically inside my damn room, or maybe just below the window. There was no one. I walked outside around the house and found nothing. It shook me up enough that I called my girlfriend who lived only a couple blocks away and asked if it was her. Nope. Her mom was not letting her out that night. It was a family night. She was trapped at home. I know what I heard it twice. Clear as day, a woman's voice calling my name from right outside my window. Skipping forward again, 5 years exactly. My mother is in town and is approached by a lady who she said had dark brown hair and looked to be the same age as one of my friend's mothers. And the lady asked, "Where is Cody?" And just like before my mom can even finish responding, the lady turns around and just walks away. She brought this up to me later that day, assuming it was one of my friend's mothers, curious as to why I wasn't with her. I remember my mom saying she was awfully rude, like my response was upsetting to her. Present time, a few weeks ago to be exact. I'm 28 years old and I have 2 kids of my own, ages 4 and 5. Our favorite thing to do together is movie night, just as it was with my mom as a kid. The wife worked late that evening, so I decided it would be fun to have a movie night. We got set up in their room and I put on the Lego movie. Halfway through, they got bored and moved to the floor to play with their blocks and started bickering like crazy people over who would get which color. I would occasionally make a joke to them about it just to listen to them bicker. Cruel, but sometimes it's amusing as a parent. I kind of noticed them get quiet and focus their attention towards the kitchen area, but I was preoccupied with the movie. I didn't pay too much attention. I shot another joke their way about Sissy can no longer have red blocks because red blocks are for boys. I was expecting a snarky, childish response from her, but I wasn't even on their radar anymore. They were both honed in to the kitchen area. They had a look of confusion on their face. When I started to take focus away from the movie to figure out what was going on in Kidland, that's when I heard it myself. A dry, almost hacking woman's cough come from the kitchen area. Instantly, I was upright and alert. Sitting in silence with my children and listening, we heard it again. That dry, hacking cough, unmistakably from a woman. This time, the kids looked up at me and could see the look on my face and probably sense my feelings. They both darted up, started to mumble and sob in a sort of panic and ran over to me. My daughter trying to hide in my lap while starting to sob and my little boy trying to scramble under the bed. That's when I heard a sound that was all too familiar. The sound of dry, scratching steps dragging over our hardwood floors towards my children's bedroom. Standing up, I told my kids to get under their beds and be quiet. My daughter was crying silently. "Someone's in the house, Dad. Someone's here and it's not Mommy." I heard the dry coughing and the scratching steps again as I made my way over to the doorway. It seemed like seconds before I would have peered through the door just to see who was on the other side of it. And suddenly, it stopped. Silence. Just the sound of my kids sobbing in a panic and asking, "Dad, who is it? Dad, where are they?" I looked into the kitchen and of course saw nothing. Empty and silent. I brought the kids around the house with me as I searched every room, closet, under the beds, locked all the doors, windows, and everything I could think of to calm them down. They stayed up until my wife got home and we all slept in the living room that night. The next day, my daughter asked me out of nowhere, "Daddy, is that lady coming back tonight?" I never said anything to my daughter about a male or female on what we heard that night. My wife asked her, "Sissy, what makes you say it was a lady?" She looked at both of us and said, "I saw a lady standing behind glass in our door." My wife asked her, "What did this lady look like?" My daughter said, "She had a hair like Dad. It was dark brown." Last night, something strange happened. My fiance and I had a late night. We sat up hanging out and just talking. We were sitting in our front room, our second living room or day room. I'm not sure what you'd call it. We kept hearing a hollow thudding sound. You could almost say footsteps coming from the laundry room. Of course, we checked and found nothing. The sound would continue, although this time coming from the hallway. When we would get to the hallway, the sound would stop and start up again in the laundry room. One of us stood in each area and the sound stopped, only to pick back up once we both returned to the front room. My fiance fell asleep on the couch. I didn't want to wake her. I grabbed a blanket, covered her up, and went to lay down in our bed. I sat up on my phone for a bit, playing a game. I happened to glance up in the direction of our doorway and saw what appeared to be someone moving past by our open door. It was quick, as if they were trying to avoid being spotted as they passed by the doorway. My first assumption was our little girl had snuck out of bed. I got up, walked into the living room, couldn't see her or anyone else, just my fiance sleeping on the couch. I checked our little girl's room and found her asleep. I did a walkthrough of the house before laying back down, just to ease my mind, before returning to bed. I fell asleep rather quickly. This is where things got really strange. I had an oddly vivid dream. I remember it perfectly. Even as I mashed the keys on my phone to type this, it still seems fresh in my mind. In my dream, I was in my 20s. My fiance didn't exist in this dream, but another person did. A girl with dark brown hair. It was almost as if she knew it was a dream and talked to me in a way that made it seem like there wasn't much time. Several past events played out, but at a rapid pace. Things that I had done before with my fiance over the years, but this time they were with that girl instead. I remember saying to this girl, "That's wrong." She was sitting across from me. She said, "I'm sorry, but I felt like there was no other way." She reached out her hand to grab mine, and that's when I woke up. I woke up feeling an immense sadness. It's been several hours, and the feeling is still lingering. I also can't help but shake the feeling that it was her. The girl in my dreams was the lady with dark brown hair. In fact, I know it was. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like, review, or a comment. As always, the original stories are linked down in the description below, and I claim no credit for the stories themselves. Be sure to follow the show everywhere at Scary But True Pod. And if you have your own scary story that you'd like me to share, email it to me at scarybutTruePod@gmail.com. My name is Michael Messerly, and I'll see you next time with more Scary But True.